meeting to order at 5 o'clock on 7/23/2021. If you'd rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You're such a speed pleasure. All right, the first item, and I got board book to work tonight, so you can follow me if you please. And the next item is C, approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
It's been moved
I second.
and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the agenda has been passed, and we'll move on to item D. So item D, we have received many comments from the public, and a lot of input on what we're looking for a superintendent, or an interim superintendent, what qualifications that we're looking for, and what the public thinks about our expedited process to select an interim superintendent. We've done steps to put this on our website and a detailed process that has been drafted by our legal counsel. And we want the public and board members to understand the details why we're calling this an expedited interim superintendent search. We also want to thank everyone who put in comments. There was lots of helpful and very consistent comments that came in during the last 24 hours. Did everyone get a chance to take a peek at them?
Yes.
More or less.
Yeah.
More or less.
If everyone's comfortable, we can move on to item D.
Point of information, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Recognizing the large volume of comments and the fact that not everyone has an opportunity to read through them, I did try to go through them and sort of try to collect themes. There were 62 comments. Some items sort of themed themselves more easily than others, but on the short timeline we had, I wasn't able to get a complete picture. But I did want to share with the board the themes that popped out were a strong preference for a candidate who had a bilingual, BIPOC kind of set of experiences and interests. There seemed to be a theme that was generally against the expedited process in terms of counting and scoring. And there was also a fairly strong theme recommending that the board reconsider their previous vote to dismiss the superintendent and to that enable them to have a full amount of time. I mention that only because I believe today would be the board's last opportunity to consider that action.
Thank you, Mr. Director Buttram. So moving on to D is board discussion on qualifications of the interim superintendent. Our first item, we will be discussing qualifications the board members are interested in as the interim superintendent. See if there's anything specific that you gentlemen,
Sure.
go ahead, sir.
I think a wealth of experience is very important. Basically some experience doing what we need him to do, him or her, because this is a point, it's a tough position to be in right now. So I think a wealth of experience, a good background in being a superintendent, I think an ex-superintendent, it would be best.
Director Thompson?
Yeah, a variety of experience in a variety of buildings, meaning, elementary, middle, and high school if possible, something like that. Some combination thereof, perhaps special ed as well. Yes, I think we're clearly angling for hopefully we were angling for a retired superintendent for who could fill in. An experience in their previous job of working with the community, a focus in their past at some point in programs and policies that relate to equity, diversity, and inclusion, a knowledge of the, and ability to explain kind of the state programs and policies that are enacted statewide. The ability to explain that to a local district, I think, is very good. The ability to explain to people a lot of things is very good. To have that, it's that kind of goes with the community, being able to explain what we're doing and what our initiatives are would be great, but, yeah, a variety of buildings, a variety of experience, a district-level experience, obviously. So like I said, I think we're looking for a retired superintendent. That's kind of number one.
I think you nailed it because reading through the comments, experience was one of the top things that kept coming up to, was looking for experience.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
without a doubt.
Oh, sorry. In addition to having experience in being, probably a retired superintendent or somebody with those skill levels, a unifier, someone who's going to be able to help bring in the diverse groups, be able to help us all work towards our goal, which is why we're here, which is the education of the students. And so I think that would be very key to have someone who's a unifier.
All right, so we will move on to the next section, letter F. Board discussion on next steps relating to the recruitment. What is our next item discussion is expedited superintendent search process that was introduced by legal counsel and provided to the public for comment. Do board members have questions or comments, concerns about the expedited process?
The only thing I would say, if I can, is giving us expedited approval doesn't mean we're going to go down this path if we don't find a candidate that's a good one. You know, I mean, I think we can always back out of it if we don't find one that we like. But if we find one that we think is highly qualified and is a good fit, it gives us the ability to move forward.
Yeah, I got real, I was against letting go of the current superintendent. And so it doesn't fall on me, it doesn't fall on us to then say, so that happened, and now the calendar as it exists is starting to be used to justify what I feel is a rushed process. And Paul's done some great work to create, but it sure looks like we've created a series of meetings and put it on the website so we can pass muster of the policies towards public comments, the bare minimum. That's what it looks like. That's what it feels like. And where this is going, I don't know. I truly don't know. And that lack of trust starts with that action. It does. So you ask me if I have problems. Yeah, I do have problems. I don't see why a process that takes long, first of all, by doing the no cause, like I said, we don't know what the problem was to begin with. And now we're rushed to fill in an empty void that, and like I said, I don't know where this is going. I've tried my best. I have some names that are just from COSA, but I don't know where this process is going. And I don't see why, I don't think suspending which is coming up here, I don't think suspending the policies, I think that's a break glass in case of emergency kind of situation, and I just don't see that right here is that situation. So, those are my thoughts.
Gentlemen?
Councilman Thompson, did you read the Democrat Herald editorial today?
Point
Yeah.
of order, members only direct their comments to the chair, not to each other.
Yeah, that's Robert's rules.
Would you like to talk about the editorial today?
No, I really wouldn't. So thank you for the point of order. I voted to change the leadership at GABS because I've come to believe it is in the best interest of our kids' education and their futures. I also agreed or felt some urgency to do that because I, for one, am not interested in changing leadership of this organization during the school year. I think it would be disruptive. The only way we can get there from here is with an expedited process.
I think it's important to let everybody know that this expedited process is for the interim superintendent, not for the full superintendent. And we have a calendar problem in that school. There needs to be a significant direction prior so that the administrators can plan and get the school year ready to go for the students' return. So it's really imperative for us to do this expedited position. And as far as the reasons, I know that people have been asking me, why did we let the superintendent go? There are members, the superintendent is the sole employee, I do this in business terms, of the board. And you must be cautious when speaking about people and their employment. So it's very imperative that we don't create a situation where we have a lawsuit. I think the board made itself clear that that desire was made and necessary, and we were able to utilize a no cause clause in the contract. And while I know other people would like to hear the reasons, it's just simply not legally practical.
Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of review. As you know, to use this expedited process, we will need to suspend board policy CBB. As a reminder, to appoint an interim superintendent in an expedited process. So my action item is to vote for the board policy CBB, recruitment and appointment of superintendent under the authority of policy BFF, suspension and policy, to hear a motion.
I will motion to suspend the board rules and use BFF suspension of policies so we can do an immediate search.
So your motion is to suspend policy CBB using policy
And
BFF
CBBAR.
and the attached AR.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
I'll speak to the motion.
Yeah, point of order.
I'll speak to the
discussion
motion.
is-
Like I said, I know I kicked it off already, but nothing prevents us from beginning a search. The policy CBB is just, it's more extensive. Guess what? It's more extensive. It's more transparency. It's more open. That's what it does. All this does is make things quick, very quick, potentially. I looked twice at the agenda. I didn't think we were going to vote. And then a couple hours ago, I saw that we potentially could have voted on a name today. After months of hearing about transparency, to go through this process right now, and it is just for the interim, I get that. But I just think, you don't listen to me, so I'll just say it again for the heck of it. I think it's a mistake to go down this road. We lose trust. It's no fun. I'm sure Commissioner Nyquist knows it's no fun, just slow.
Director Thompson, please keep it to
Well,
the
I'm not, I'm
subject
just saying,
of
as a
what we're voting
commissioner,
on.
as, I'm sure he knows that
No
public
offense
process, public process slows things down. And, it just is what it is. And I think even our CBB, we could act quickly if we met a lot, and maybe it ends up in September, October, I don't know. But that's not the issue. That's not the issue.
I don't believe that CCB would be a 1 or 2 month process. This is a extensive process, most of them lasting 8 to 9 to 12 months long. Is there any further discussion?
Other than a note that school starts in 6 weeks.
Chair Aganaga, I'll just give you some information. Of the public comment that folks requested in those 3 action items, the vote to suspend policy, there were 31 comments that said no, 5 yes, so 6 times more. And then the vote for an expedited process, there were 45 comments for no and 6 yes, so that's 7.5 times more public comment. And then I would also just add that the oath that you took as board members states that you
Madam Superintendent.
uphold the
Madam
policies of the
Superintendent.
school district. Each
Madam
member.
Superintendent,
No,
excuse me.
Each member of the board
Madam
has an
Superintendent,
opportunity
excuse
to
me.
speak.
Go to recess.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
John, please stop the tape.
The oath you took states that you'll uphold the policies of the school district, and your first decision is to absolve yourself of that oath and responsibility.
Keep the recording going and just move on.
We'll return from recess into normal session. And while I do respect public comment, there was obviously a planned campaign from multiple members of the community for input. Those are recognizable names, and we will talk about the vote on hand, the motion on hand. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion passes. This is going to bring us to our next topic of action to vote to consider qualified interim superintendent candidates with an extensive search and interview process.
Without.
Without. Excuse me. So the next item is to consider adopting the expedited interim superintendent process. This expedited process is outlined in the document we can provide on our website that the public has had an opportunity to review on. I will not be reading the whole expedited process unless a board member would like me to do so. Is there a motion to adopt the expedited process?
I'd like you to read the whole thing. I need to know about what.
You haven't read it, Mr. Thompson?
I think you have to if he's requesting it.
Yeah, I'm requesting.
I'm just
that.
asking if
Yeah.
have you actually read it?
Can't remember.
It's on the back of that. Or I'd be happy to read it. If you.
Yeah, if council would like to read it, I'd be happy.
So the expedited interim superintendent search includes the following steps. Individual board members would recruit a qualified and licensed superintendent who is interested and available in acting as an interim superintendent for the 21-22 school year, or until the board of directors hires a permanent superintendent using a process outlined in policy CBB, whichever period is less. Number two, the proposed interim superintendent candidate meets the qualifications already adopted by the board in policy CBA. Next, the proposed interim superintendent agrees that he or she will not apply for the permanent superintendent position at any time in the future. D, the qualified candidate is presumed to be a retired Oregon School superintendent, but being retired is not a requirement. The board of directors is looking for a qualified candidate who has experience as a superintendent in Oregon. E, the qualified candidate must currently hold a valid Oregon superintendent's license. F, if board members are able to locate a qualified candidate, that candidate will be directed to the board's legal counsel, Paul Dikopoulos. Legal counsel is authorized to discuss potential contract terms with a qualified candidate if the board member intends to propose that candidate to the board. G, all preliminary discussions between the district's legal counsel and a proposed candidate are not binding on the board. The district's legal counsel has no authority to enter into a contract with a proposed candidate. The name of any qualified candidate will be submitted to the board of directors in an open session of the board as soon as possible. The target date for the submission of the name of a qualified candidate is Friday, July 23rd, tonight, or during the week of July 26, 2021. Section I, a proposed qualified candidate will be invited to address the board in a public board meeting. The target date for a board meeting with a proposed candidate is the week of July 26, 2021, or as soon as a proposed candidate is identified. Section J, the board of directors will give the public an opportunity to comment on the proposed qualified candidate at the next scheduled board meeting before the board takes action to hire an interim superintendent. K, if the board of directors takes action to hire an interim superintendent, the board will discuss the terms of employment only in an open public session. L, as soon as possible, the board will provide a draft contract for the public's review and comments prior to taking action on approving the contract. And the last provision, M, the board will take action prior to initiating a search for a permanent superintendent to reinstate policy CBB and CBB-AR. A search for a permanent superintendent will follow the process outlined in policy CBB. that was the, what are calling the expedited interim superintendent search process that was put on your website.
Thank you, sir, I appreciate it.
Was that an action item? Is there a motion on the floor already?
We're ready for it.
I move to approve as read by council.
I second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion passes.
Point of order,
Are-
I don't know that you did action item G, which was before H, which is what you just did, which was vote to suspend the board policies. I think you just voted for the expedited process.
No,
Okay,
I believe there was a
Thought we
vote.
did.
We voted
okay,
twice.
I'm,
brought it up.
okay, I'm following you in board book. I don't
You've
see it.
advanced it, actually.
Do we want to do it again, just make sure?
No, we voted
Okay,
on
I
it.
thought we voted on it.
So now that you've, may I
Yes,
have
sir.
just a moment, please? So now that you've approved this expedited process, are there any questions for me? I'm the one who outlined this. Does the board have any questions for me about the process? I mean, I tried to explain it in a very clear fashion, but now's the time.
Well, I do, if I might. I just want to clarify, when was it we met? Was it Wednesday? The days are all running together. But council, I remember specifically asking if there was anything in statute that prohibited us from going to an expedited process. And as I remember it, the response was no. In fact, there's a statute that specifically permits it. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And that's in the Oregon School Board Association policy, and the statutory references in that policy, BFF.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no more questions for council, we'll move on to number I, letter I. That's board discussion on candidates. Now that we have an expedited process for an interim superintendent, that process gives board's members the opportunity to seek out potential qualified interim superintendent candidates. And do we have members that have any potential candidates for the board's consideration?
Well, you see, so we're just flying blind, you know, COSA, thanks to Heather, a list from COSA was produced of frankly recently, I think most of these folks just doing my little searching, retired in 2021. And I sent them to Paul. I mean, that's the extent. Did some searching on, and, you know, newspaper articles about their experience with their various districts. They're kind of a little bit of biography on each one. That's it, because, you know, part of this is the idea that board members would know superintendents to such a degree that we could create, you know, it just kind of blows my mind. You know, I've only been doing this for 2 years. 3 of you have been here since July 1. I mean, we are not in the world of education administrators. And so, but we have people, we have staff that are in that world and know how to get, and, I mean, all I know is the Consolidated Oregon School Administrators Association. I mean, that's what I know. So I have names of, and I have no idea if they want to do something like this. I have no idea if they're happy in retirement. I have no idea. They just have sterling backgrounds and, you know, credentials from one of the places they just retired from, and that's it. That's it.
I was not able to print that out.
I can say, I
but
have
you
written
the
down, I've
names.
written down all the names. Kathleen Rodden Nord from Junction City, 18 years at Junction City, a special ed teacher previously.
Point of information, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
or point of inquiry.
Yeah.
Given that these, I'm trying to clarify process, these folks may not be interested in being involved in our process.
Yeah.
Should the names go to council first to determine their interest?
Well, these were given
Just today,
out
yeah.
by COSA, so.
Oh, that's right,
I
from
think
COSA
any
to
name
me.
has to be
Okay,
Said
I
in public
just wanted to
session.
clarify before we mention their names.
Yeah,
I
Understandable.
appreciate that.
Understandable.
But
This is-
presumably, yeah.
Fair enough.
Want me to continue then?
Sorry for the interruption.
Mary Alice Russell from McMinnville, Oregon Superintendent of the Year in 2013, an elementary and middle school principal. Matt Utterback from North Clackamas, actually Superintendent of the Year for the American Association of School Administrators. Trip Goodall from Canby, and some comments about Trip from his board, talking about his experience there. Added full-time counselors to elementary schools, which is we just did. Added calendar days to the school year. Puts equity at the heart of every decision. And Chris Parra from Bethel, which is Bethel's about the same size of ours, 32 years in education, 21 years at Cottage Grove before that, a teacher, a principal at elementary school, and a director of special ed. Was very active in the community in Cottage Grove, so that kind of experience. And so I'm doing them disservice because I'm not even talking about probably all the highlights they would talk about themselves if they could speak for themselves. But, there's 5 names, and I just feel like it's not adequate because I'm just a part-time volunteer school board member, That is the point. That's the point. We have experts who can bring, and then also, here we're saying this and we're not getting any input from staff. We're not getting any input. We're getting input from parents to some degree, but this stuff takes time. This stuff takes time. So there's 5 names.
Thank you, Director Thompson.
Yeah.
Are we having legal counsel reach out to them, or are you gonna reach out to them, or how's that gonna work?
You guys, my first step was legal counsel. I would suggest our HR, our staff somehow determine how they best want to reach out to them, maybe get back to us with who they think is even interested.
Okay.
That'd be my suggestion.
I received the list this afternoon, and I thank you for it.
Yeah,
But I haven't had time to
sure.
communicate. I don't know that any,
Any are interested.
interested.
I have a candidate I'd like to bring forward. Mr. Rob Saxton for our interim superintendent position. I think he's incredibly qualified. He's, I'll just name 3 things he's done. He's been the interim superintendent of the education service in the District of Hillsborough. He's been the deputy superintendent of schools for the state of Oregon. He's been a superintendent for Sherwood. He has experience in our district as a teacher and an administrator.
Does the board have, any board member want to comment on this proposed candidate?
We're discussing Rob Saxton right now? Is that what is
Yes,
that what's
sir.
on the floor?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's hard to, you want to get in debate about Rob Saxton's background. That's impossible. We're not going to have someone at that level. I have grave concerns that he represents, he has more of a connection to Albany at a time when we are polarized. We are polarized. And that's part of the issue. And I think making someone whose son is an administrator at West, at one building, it's not really fair to Rob, to tell you the truth. And I don't know how much if he just wants to come back to Albany and help, I'm not sure. But it's not fair for him really to jump into this because all that great background, he's gonna be perceived in one way, I think. I just think. And so I think, once again, going into this polarization, I think we need to back off someone that has a real or perceived bias.
I'm not. Well, Board Member Thompson, you got it right when you said we're not going to have another candidate of this level. That's absolutely true. I don't know anything about bias, if you will. If I remember right, I could be wrong. Mr. Saxon, while he was here, was actually the principal at South Albany High School. I also remember him being the football coach at South Albany High School. And unfortunately, a guy who has a background from West Albany now, I don't live in that area, but he also had a record at football coach in which South Albany won more games than West Albany during that rivalry period. So I am lucky was the Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction in the state of Oregon. During that time, I watched him, this guy from Albany that I knew some time ago. I think everybody who did was impressed with the ability to bring people together. So, given that, given where we are, that would lend itself to be that he's exactly the right guy for the times. If you look at what he did in his time at the Tigard-Tualatin School District, the district had showed marked improvement under his tenure. One area of particular focus for Saxon was closing the gap between minority students and the statewide averages in reading and mathematics. Colleagues also note his keen focus on early literacy and reducing inappropriate special education classifications. So, awfully good. I don't know. I don't know how we do better if we wait till October. I don't know how we do better in a permanent candidate, but that's not the task before us. And I understand, I completely understand the angst and the heartburn over what is a rushed process, and it is. And sometimes we're in positions where we take the best information we have and we make the best decisions we have in a matter that's appropriate for the timing and the circumstances. And you're also right about polarization in the community. And my view of that is the longer we take, the longer that goes on. I want both for the school year and our kids' education, for our community to waive the process as we've done, go out and find the best candidate we can and hire him. And absent somebody else fabulous coming forward, Rob Saxon's a guy we ought to talk to.
Can I speak, or is someone else going to speak? Or?
Mr. Wilson, do you have any comments before we
Yeah,
loop
go
around
ahead.
again?
Sure,
Go
if
ahead,
you don't
yeah.
mind. He seems to be a fantastic candidate who I believe would come in, has special knowledge of our district, was a teacher here, if I understand right, and of course the coach and all the things you outlined, and I won't go over them again, but has affinity for this community. And it speaks volumes that he's willing to come out of retirement to help us for 1 year. I believe that he will be the right person to help get everyone back together and be that uniter that I'm hoping for, so that we can all move towards the goal of educating our children and lifting everyone up to the best possible students they can be.
So one negative about him, and the people I named off were all recent superintendents in school districts, and it's been a while. It's been like more than 10 years since he was an ESD superintendent, and education moves quick. And I would just mean, but I don't want to get into a back and forth about, I do question how, I did my little search and that, and you guys pull out of your back pocket, Rob Saxon. I got,
Pretty good, huh?
yeah, well, it kind of begs the question, an expedited process, don't listen to anybody, boom, here's, a former, I think he was the first appointed by Kitzhaber, the first statewide, that position was elected before, is what I'm trying to say. I think he was the first one that was appointed, So it looks like, for all the world, that you had that in your back pocket, and we're just trying to get through the most minimum of public input to end up with that. And
Well, part of our job is to know our community, know constituents. I have relationships with other superintendents across the state that maybe I was a student when they were a history teacher, and they've made it to superintendent status.
More power to
I've
you, more
made
power
phone
to you.
calls and got the no, I'm very happy where I'm at also, because we did talk about on Wednesday that we would start reaching out and getting names together. But that is part of our job as leaders of our community, to look and find qualified candidates. I don't think we're gonna find a more qualified candidate to be an interim superintendent. Does the board,
Director
it-
Aganaga? I wonder, I mean, one of the questions I have is, has anyone worked directly for Rob Saxton? Please raise your hand. I actually worked with him at the state. I was the Director of School Improvement for the state of Oregon under Rob. And I'll tell you, he's a great guy. I really enjoyed working with Rob and with Jim Carlisle at the state at the time. There were several different pieces of work that we worked on. The question I would have would be for the board and the district's legal counsel in terms of conflict of interest. So I don't know what that would be, if there's a conflict of interest with him having a family member. I mean, obviously, he couldn't supervise that staff member, I know that. Or a conflict of interest with the district or the board, having been the person who previously negotiated Jim Golden's contract. I think those are things that you should probably explore.
I did look at the ethics issue. I don't believe there's anything to an ethics claim relating to the fact that he negotiated or had some involvement. I don't know this, but if it's true that he had some involvement in negotiating a contract for a superintendent 3 superintendents ago, I don't see how that's a conflict. I mean, it's, I just can't imagine how that would be a conflict. Though I think the issue of him having a son who's an administrator in the district, I looked at that knowing that this issue would come up because part of the expedited process was that you would give me a name and I would talk to this individual. So I did. There is an ethics policy that talks about, and this is policy GBC, and this talks about how if there is a member of a household that works in the district and another member of the household is a supervisor, there has to be separation. And as I understand it, there would be between an assistant principal and a superintendent. And so it is not uncommon in Oregon education for this to occur, but there has to be supervisory separation. So it would not, in my legal opinion, it's not an impermissible ethics issue.
as we talked about conflicts of interest over this week, actually, or last week, you know, those things come up, and I have served with 3 other board members that have staff members that they're married to. And we've always done that very cautiously and very respectfully.
The difference is supervising, right? As a board member, you don't supervise.
But we ultimately they have appeal authority to the board for their job,
Absolutely.
and
Yep.
it does, there's some things that do come to us. Is there a consensus of the board that we'd like to proceed with inviting the proposed candidate to the next public meeting next week so we can have a chance to interview him?
I would be in favor of that.
I'd be in favor.
Director Thompson?
I'll say no, but I'm looking forward to.
But it looks like we
talking
have a
to him.
consensus.
You're- Okay.
We'll schedule a meeting next Monday, July 26th at 5 PM for the process of interviewing this candidate as outlined in our expedited process.
May I have it?
Yes, sir.
So as part of the expedited process, it fell on me to have at least an initial conversation. And I think that Mr. Saxton is, he's informed me that he's able to come to a meeting on Monday, and I think the time is 5 PM. And I think that's the time for, number one, for the public to spend some time learning about Mr. Saxton. It's also a time for the board to essentially have an interview. Part of the expedited process is you don't get to do an interview in private.
Right.
So I think you get to ask your questions of Mr. Saxton, He's indicated to me that he's very willing to do that. And so that would be Monday, and we need to notice that meeting. You know, I've provided some language about that to the board's executive secretary. I'd actually asked her to notice 5 meetings in a row, Monday, Tuesday through Friday, because I didn't know what would happen tonight.
You're probably on her Christmas card list.
Well, it's the same agenda with the caveat that if you didn't have a consensus tonight that you wanted to move forward with a candidate, then we just call the whole meetings off next week. So in any event, that's the preliminary conversation I've had.
And I would encourage board members to prepare questions ahead of time and send them to legal counsel, and just, that's gonna make sure that we're not asking any questions that are inappropriate for the interview process.
Chair Aguinaldo, could I ask that you create a format that we could utilize so that we can have some semblance of order as we go through these questions? I don't know if we want to assign each board member some certain time and the public some certain time, or something like that, but there should be some sort of a guideline so that we can do this orderly.
Okay, so council and I will have our homework ready for us Monday, after you submit your questions.
So one of the good things about this process is there is no executive, there's been no executive session. Normally, I think these kinds of things probably would have been done in executive session first. So for anybody interested who's watching, the name is out there, and we should set up a process to receive public comment. And I would just ask if the same process we just used, give people until Monday at noon, or whatever time to forward those comments on this candidate in writing to us. So we'll have those prior to talking with the candidate.
I would assume one of the good things about doing this way, I know there's some bad, is the idea that we could actually, if there's a question that comes up over and over again from the public, we could ask the candidate live on, network, their question, which normally the public doesn't get. So, I mean, you tallied up who, if we have a question that comes up a lot, I'm sure happy to use my time to ask a majority of those questions or try. I think that's good, and the public normally doesn't get to see that process, and this is the sausage being made. People can watch it.
Well, I hope that's not how it turns out, but
Yeah, I think it'll be good.
Director Aguinaldo, we have, from the last 2 searches, both for Superintendent Goff and Superintendent Mills, just some of the questions that were used in the process. Sometimes it's easier to edit than to author. If you want us to just send them to you to say, here's what it looks like,
That would be greatly appreciated.
to
ma'am.
just give you some ideas there, that's easy to do. Director Huzefka can do that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, that looks like it's going to bring us to action item J. A vote to authorize legal counsel to negotiate a contract with a prospective interim superintendent, subject to board approval at the next board meeting.
Just a point of information, Mr. Decopoulos, when I was looking at it, it says the name of any qualified candidate will be submitted to the Board of Directors in an open session. For H that you have, and then F, right before it says if board members are able to locate a qualified candidate. One of the things that it doesn't do is connect the dots between H and F. So G gives you authority for a preliminary discussion between candidates that board members submit in open session and your ability to have those conversations. What it doesn't do is say, how do you get from those proposed names, if there are 6, and to H?
I'm not sure the point.
We do have
I
a,
got a name, and I initiated a phone call. I don't feel like I need any board authority to do that in this process. So that's my answer.
And board members have other candidates, we can share your name and they can be part of it.
Right,
That
that's
was
what I
our
was
direction
clarifying.
on
Right.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
That's what I was clarifying for
Yes, ma'am.
Director Thompson.
Take a,
I don't think we voted on
No,
Jay.
we haven't-
Not
we
yet.
haven't made it.
Oh,
A motion
need
yet.
a motion to vote to authorize legal counsel to negotiate a contract with prospective interim superintendent, subject to board approval at the next board meeting. Yeah, so it starts there.
Okay. I motion to vote to authorize district legal counsel to negotiate contract with prospective interim superintendent, subject to board approval at the next board meeting. The first name that's been brought up is Rob Saxton. Others are welcome to be brought up.
I second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed. Motion passes. All right, we will move into adjourn, and thank you for coming, and we will see you see you Monday at 5.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.